honored to be here as part of this micro-learning experience. And I think it's just a great platform for story sharing. And that's exactly what this book is all about. It's in the backdrop of Kentucky, where I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, where we're experiencing horse country. And by the way, happy Derby to everybody from across the country. This is an exciting time for us here in Louisville as we approach Derby week. But it was by no accident that the flavor of the book and the title of the book was around kind of the analogies around storytelling, around faith, family, and friends, stories told from my voice and from the voice of friends and family and my faith-based community that really just talks about reflecting on life and how that can drive you forward and inspire you on your next stages of your journey. So I felt like it was apropos for us to talk about that in the context of leadership and specifically reflecting on the aspects of leadership character. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more. As we started to journal the book and put the compilation together, it really was poignant how powerful this idea of storytelling really has become in our society today. Whether that's storytelling to your kids or stories that have been handed down to you for generations, stories around work and opportunities or situations you're trying to work through, relationship storytelling. But where I found the real power was in the sharing of those stories. And so the vision for this whole endeavor, certainly the book is important, and I encourage everybody to take it on and give it a read. But it's really the springboard of what my bigger vision is, and that is building a story sharing community. I think now more than ever, especially coming out of the pandemic, people are eager to collaborate, eager to share experiences, and try to be inspirational in moving people in the right direction. And you do that best by collaboration. We're actually going to talk about collaborative spirit a little bit later. But I think it is a great platform to talk about leadership, a little bit of context around me and my background and what kind of brought me on this journey. I grew up in Western Kentucky. Have a brother and a sister, and I had 12 cousins that lived within walking distance of me, which I saw every day. So that was really a part of building my character and building my, if you will, leadership skills, because we were a little tribe running around Bowling Green, Kentucky on a day-to-day basis, really close-knit family. I'm a cradle to grave Episcopalian. I grew up in the Episcopal Church and still belonged to St. James Episcopal. We got married there. We raised our kids there. It's a strong faith-based community and really inspired a lot of the writing that you're going to hear about today. My family is my rock. I'm married to my wonderful husband of 30 years. We have 3 kids together. I have 4 stepchildren. I have 5 beautiful son and daughter-in-laws, which equals out to 18 grandkids. So you see there our wall of fame. Those are our kids. But my little bundle of joy, our most recent arrival, Clara Joy, is up there in the corner. She's 2.5 months. But we continue to grow. Faith and family and friends are my core. And I just love you guys. Hope you're on. I'm also blessed with a great network of friends that span literally across the globe. We have friends in Ireland we just visited before COVID, thankfully. Friends from the business community. We just had a reunion with our high school friends you see there on the beach, which I hadn't seen some of those ladies in 30 years. And it was like we were back in high school. So I know everybody on the call is eager to get back to normal, eager to reconnect with your friends. And I think the book is a catalyst for just reinforcing those stories and inspiring you to get back together with your networks when we can. I'm a lifelong learner. I graduated from UK with a double major in marketing and advertising back in the day. I'll go ahead, it's 1985. Engaged in a lot of management and leadership programs. I'm just wired that way. Most recently, I went back to get my MBA at the age of 53 You see my graduating class there. It was an executive MBA program with U of L and UK. And as Zuri said, it was the intent to get my master's so I could teach at the college level, and I'm really enjoying that experience at U of L. So that's a little bit about my personal life. In terms of professional, I'm a brand addict. I've been in marketing and advertising my whole career, spanning from first job at Price Weber to 8-year stint at Doe Anderson right here in Louisville as well, and then founded the Pepper Group in 2005, sold that in 18, and went on to start my consulting firm, GCJ Consultants, again, right here in Louisville. We have been beneficial or been effective at driving brands forward, establishing brands, and also sustaining brands in all sectors, whether that's consumer packaged goods or nonprofit. So people often ask me, you know, what's your niche? Or I've been fortunate enough to span the spectrum of brands and absolutely love the challenge and the relationship building. And I have a lot of stories around these brands, and it's been a fabulous career. I guess most importantly, where I really get my reward is just giving back in the community engagement that I've had the opportunity to serve on boards or committees or just community building. And here's a plethora of what I've been doing lately. And I look forward to keeping on. Again, I think this community is the finest. Love Louisville. We are great. We're coming together. And I want to be a part of that. So I'm privileged to be a part of that. So getting back to kind of what we're here today about the leadership aspect. And so I think not only COVID, but just where we are in our state of mind, we're in transition. And I think life is full of transitions. You're always in transition one way or another. But I think reflecting back on your journey, I'm at a stage in my life, again, kind of in a major transition, and that's when I was starting to write the book. But I think when you go through that reflection, you're looking back on the stories that helped shape you and helped you get to where you are, but also kind of helping you draw out that strategic pathway or that personal pathway to where you really want to be, where you really want to go. And so that's what we're going to talk about in terms of building yourself up, being the best leader you can be in a certain aspect of leadership. So I really encourage you, I say this in the book, you know, soak it all in, connect with what drives you forward, and get inspired to share with others. And that's exactly what we hope to achieve today. So let's just unpack leadership a little bit at a high level. So when I dove into the researching the topic of just leadership, I found a lot of content around competency building and bundling. I found a lot of content around commitment to leadership practices. Didn't find a whole lot around character. And maybe that's because when you talk about leadership character, it's really the most difficult to define. It's the most difficult to assess and develop. And so even though it's very essential, especially for cross-enterprise organizations of all sizes and shapes, it really doesn't get as much attention, at least from a literal standpoint, as you would think. So I thought it'd be challenging to kind of dive in and make some parallels with the stories in the book around leadership character. So what does character mean? I think you can break that down as well. So you have naturally competencies, what our skill sets are, how we're bundling that, how we're packaging that, how we're furthering our education on our skill set and sharpening the knife. But also the commitment piece is such a huge part of where we're striving to be as leaders, as employees, as mothers, as sisters, just a commitment to leading your family or leading your business as basically boils down to what you want to do, what is driving you in terms of the DNA. And then you get down to the character. And at the end of the day, this is probably what you will end up acting on. It's that character, it's that drive, it's that internal value system. And again, how you're wired is really going to lead you to take the step over and actually take action on that step. So that's really what character is in the makeup of leadership. I love this excerpt from Donna's foreword. I was privileged enough to have, honored enough to have Donna Barton Brothers, who's a NBC TV commentator, and obviously if you're from Kentucky, you know Donna as a former top jockey of her time. And she writes a lot about the analogies between horse country storytelling, Kentucky around, and she talked about this term in terms of character. And she said, you know, philosophically, a lot of people say that riding horses, you know, build your character. And she says, I think about it in a little different area. I think it reveals character. And if you think about it in all of your leadership exercises, and you're going through good times or you're going through bad times with your team, that's really revealing your character. And I'm challenging us, I challenge myself to step back and reflect on that and say, okay, maybe this is not a very good character. I have a character flaw here I need to work on. So you have to be willing to dig a little deeper and say, you know, I understand who I am a little bit better, but now what am I going to do about it? And take the risk and take the opportunity to improve. So unpacking the character also can be drawn from traits and values. And then what we're going to spend a lot of our time on today is virtues. So traits, when you think about traits, those are more those habitual patterns. They can become from stability, almost an inherent ability to establish a trait, or it can come from experiences. I found a lot of my character traits have come from just delving into experiences, things I haven't tried before, whether that's mentoring or coaching or leading a team that may be a little bit out of my comfort zone. But I've established traits over that time. And I think that's, some of them are inherent, like I said, but some of them are learned. Same thing with values, but they act as a little bit more baked into your DNA, I believe. It's basically your established belief system. And it really, that system acts as your behavioral guidepost. That's what's going to lend the importance, the value you give on that particular initiative or that particular exercise. And it's really going to influence, your values are going to influence your decision-making, probably subliminal, more than we think. But again, that's just how we're wired, and that belief system starts at a relatively young age. And then we get to virtues. And like I said, this is where I really want to dig deep. Virtues are really defined as the clusters of those good traits and those good values. And so, for example, virtues of courage or accountability, we're going to dig into 7 of them. But lots of them can work hand in glove. Some of them work independently as you go about your day, as you go about your leadership responsibilities. But virtues actually came from a Greek, back in the ancient Greek times, and there's actually a lot of data on that. If you want to do some reading, there's a lot of good backtrack on how these virtues were established. And some people say there's 10, some people say there's 12, 25. We're going to focus on the 10 or 8 of the 10 today. But I love this quote that Aristotle wrote in context of virtues. It says, virtues, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is actually actually a habit. Excellence is actually a habit. And I thought that was really telling, that if we consistently do something, if we're consistently courageous, consistently accountable for our actions, that just starts to become the way we do business and the way we lead. So I thought that was very telling. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the character, leadership character, in the context of these 10 kind of cross-enterprise reach of virtues. You see everything from humility, integrity, etc. And we're going to do that on building off the platform or the construct of the book, which again is a compilation of stories. But I purposely divided the book into not chapters, so it's not a book where you read linearly from book cover to book cover. You can jump in a section at a time. You can journal. We have a journaling section in there. So I thought that might be an interesting platform to build our learning off of today. So each section of the book actually pertains to one of the virtues that you just saw. So you can really dig into these sections at a later date, obviously, and stream out stories or unearth some stories around each of these, and hopefully take them back and practice those in your line of work. So let's start with Transcendence. And it's all about staying the course. I mean, how many times have we said to ourselves, if I only knew that now if I only knew then what I know now, what I've learned from my journey. You know, I think it's all about staying true to ourselves and staying grounded in whatever we need. It starts with a plan. It's just human nature for us to want to carve out a pathway for our lives, our pathway for success in our careers. That's just a natural thing, but life happens. And certainly the pandemic, I think, has shown us that life just happens, and it's tougher to stay the course and stay on those goals and keep your team motivated. It's tough, but it's doable if you just take it one day at a time. So this whole section around staying the course really gets to this. You've got to come into it with this sense of optimism and purpose. Without that, you as leaders just tend to become myopic yourselves. You're not coming at it from a visionary point of view, and therefore you're not really rallying the troops, and you're not really encouraging subliminally and overtly, you're not really encouraging those to follow suit and look at things from more that big picture and visionary standpoint. So transcendence is hugely important as it becomes in your leadership virtue set. This is one of my favorite stories in the book, and it was, again, inspired by Donna and her whole analogy of riding the track. And when you get down to it, life's track can get pretty sloppy at times, and you got to learn when to pull down your goggles. And I love when Donna says it's not a matter of how many, or it's not a matter of if you need goggles in life, it's a matter of how many pairs you're going to need in a given day. So I think the analogy of the fast track, I mean, that's where a lot of life is just humming along, right? It's at a brisk pace, and then you have stuff like the pandemic that comes along, or a sickness, or a faith issue, and you hit some rough spots, and it might even get sloppy. But when it gets sloppy, you got to let that pain hit you, but you got to get over it and move on. So it's about pulling down the goggles, knowing when to do it, and just continuing to strive. So I thought this was a great analogy. And like I said, it goes a little bit deeper in the book, but something I always harken back to when I'm feeling a little down or feeling a little beat up. I just remind myself that life happens, which talks about humility as well. So again, learning and living and riding that sloppy track along the way, you don't have control. I mean, I'm a big believer that God is in control. You're just along for the ride. But I have finally, in my older age, I've gotten comfortable with the fact that I don't control everything, but I can accept and own the journey. And I need to take the life lessons that learned. So I think the biggest mistake that leaders, at least my experience, that leaders and myself as a leader have made in the past is I try to just push that behind myself and try to just move on to the next thing. And I don't think I've really taken the time to reflect on that milestone in my journey, whether it was really good or really bad or kind of in between. I really haven't taken the time to take that lesson in and just learn from it and hopefully share those best practices with others. And that's, I'm really making a commitment, ask you to join me to do that. But you have to do that with a sense of humility, like that open-mindedness and that sharing of ideas. And it can't just be talking the talk. You really need to demonstrate that. And the leaders that do that well are very relatable. They're very approachable. And without it, you become isolated. You become kind of siloed, especially in today's virtual world. If you're not being transparent, if you're not being communicative, if you're not being inclusive and letting all the voices be heard, you're not really demonstrating that humility that probably got you in that leadership spot to begin with. So again, reflection, and being able to be true to yourself and really opening yourself up. That really, for me, has always started with the initial greeting and opening yourself up and welcoming that new person or that existing colleague into your life. It really starts with the handshake. So I'm going to attribute this story to my dad. It's one of my favorite stories. It goes a lot deeper than this. This is just an excerpt. But when we grew up, my dad he doesn't know a stranger, first of all. He walks into a room and 5 minutes later, he knows 40 people by name and knows their children's name. So we really grew up with that kind of mantra of opening yourself up with humility. And the first time he meets somebody, it's all about the handshake. And so he taught us that. I've been told I have a firm grip, I have a firm handshake. And when I was younger, I like to tell this story because when I was younger, I was it was awkward and kind of embarrassing. And I'm not a huge person, and I had this like death grip and people would comment on it. But then I started owning it. It's like, that's maybe part of who I am, and I'm not going to make apologies for it. But man, oh man, do we not miss the handshake right now? So, the fist pump, the elbow thing, it just doesn't do it for me. And I don't think it does it for a lot of people. It's just instinctive to reach out your hand, and that's your first greeting. That's your first opportunity to really open yourself up physically and mentally to that person across the way. So I can't wait to get back to the handshake. I can't wait to practice my death grip. So thank you, Dad. That's him celebrating his 83rd birthday this month. So along with the humility and kind of accepting that comes accountability and ownership. I write a whole section around just being present, being in the moment. And I think we've all suffered from it, but man, has the pandemic really shown us how important it is to physically and mentally be present in your position as a leader, as a mom, as a teacher, as a family member, as a colleague. Just being able to be in that moment and physically be able to express that you're listening. There's a big difference between listening and hearing. And I've really been practicing that. Are you listening and hearing, or are you hearing what you think you want to hear? And so just by showing up, there's a lot to be said just by showing up, putting everything aside and being in that conversation, really being present. And so I have a lot of stories around that. But when you think about being present, isn't it really about just being accountable for your actions? At least it starts there. It's demonstrating that you are accountable, that you're present, you're accountable for your actions and your words, and people can depend on you for owning that. If you can't show and demonstrate that accountability, you can't expect others to step up and learn from that. It creates this culture of fear, this culture of disengagement. So I am all about owning it, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I've learned over time, people aren't going to look at you as a leader in a bad way for taking that accountability on. Quite the opposite. I've had people say, that was courageous for you to take that stand, or that was really owning up to that mistake or that misstep in the strategic process. The fact that you own that really made me trust you more and have more respect for you. And I will follow you on the next journey. So I'm all about accountability, and there's tons of books on it. I'm not the expert, but I sure am going to start practicing it more. This is kind of a humorous thing that brought me back to this idea of being present. We were, as I mentioned, we were in Ireland a couple of years ago. We walked into this little pub, and on the wall behind the bar was this actual sign. It said, "There will be no mobile phones or computers in this space, no exceptions, talk to someone." And my husband and I got the biggest kick out of that, because it's like, really, have we come to the society where we have to be told to talk to someone? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. And I think it goes even further. I think it goes to the boardroom. I think it goes into planning meetings. You see people fidgeting, they're not really engaged, they're not really present. I think we all, now that we hopefully will be coming out of this virtual age, maybe not completely, but have the opportunity to really interface in person, let's all try to be a little bit more present. So speaking of courage, I think part of life's journey is being able to get out of your experience zone, get into or out of your comfort zone and get into your experience zone. And just remember, you're not in control. Things might not always go the way you want. The possibilities that negatives could eventually outweigh the positive, that's reality. And so once I started recognizing that it might be not so significant in that day and point of time, but take it all in. Take it all in. The little insignificant experiences that might touch you at a moment, you might find yourself reflecting back on that little experience. So park that and learn from it and just soak it all in. I have a client that loves to say, I need to marinate in that for a minute. So I encourage all of us to just take the time to marinate a little bit and not be so swift to try to move on to the next thing. So that takes courage, though, to try the new things, to marinate and reflect. That takes tenacity, takes confidence in what you're doing, to not just zigzag and go through life without soaking it all in and learning from it. So it demonstrates perseverance. But if you don't have it, you're going to be pursued or if you're not demonstrating it, you're going to be perceived as taking the easy route. And who wants to do that, right? You want to be that leader that's carrying the baton. You're carrying others with you and making the decision, making a difference, whether you're a nonprofit on a mission and have a vision to do great things in the community, or whether you're a leader of a new business who's trying to get off the ground. I can't think of a more courageous opportunity than new businesses right now, trying to elevate and sustain. So all of that takes courage. And isn't that really, aren't you really postponing the inevitable if you don't adopt courage? So that's one of my favorite virtues. Collaboration, I think just organically, we are living in a spirit of collaboration as leaders. We have leaders that are just born leaders. Like one of my son is a born leader. He just has the traits. He expresses that all the time. And then we have leaders that are kind of evolve into their leadership status and are more comfortable and more efficient and more effective as more supportive leaders that are more supportive in the back of the scenes. So whatever that situation is, if you're a leader in your family, if you're a leader in your congregation, being okay with failing, being okay with your teammates failing, but not ever letting them become failures. I think that is the testament to a strong leader. I have that saying on my wall in my office because I have to constantly remind myself it's okay to fail as long as you don't allow yourself to become a failure. And your support system, if you're sharing, if you're relating to others up and down the ladder, managing up as well as managing across your team, you're not going to become a failure. So always try to remember you've got to bring people with you every step of the way. So you do that through a consultative approach to leadership. And if you're doing it right, it's this almost collective thought and cooperative style of communication, of strategizing, ideating. Ideas can come from anywhere. You know that old adage, there's not a bad idea in an ideation situation. So I think there's now more clarity around diverse ideas and collective thinking and learning how to do that. I know Leadership Louisville has lots of programs around, planning great meetings and how to demonstrate collaboration and how to do that effectively, how to lead that effectively. But if you don't do that in this spirit, if you're not leading your organization in that spirit, you're going to get friction, you're going to get breakdown. So it used to be kind of a nice to have, and people would tout their collaborative processes. Now it's kind of a have to have to operate efficiently and be an organization of attraction. So this is one of the stories in that section of the book, Bring the People With You. I think we all have a tendency to say, it's just be a lot simpler if I just buckle down and do this task myself. By the time I demonstrate or try to extend it to my team members or outsource it to someone else, or have to train somebody on how to achieve the goal. I'd just rather do it myself. I know I'm super guilty of that. So if you're really, truly working in the spirit of collaboration, you've got to bring those people with you earlier and not necessarily carry the big stick. But here's a word of caution, and I've caught myself in this as well. There is a point as a leader where, yes, you want to hear the voices. Yes, you want to have that collective spirit of thought. But there is a time where a decision has to be made, and it might not be the most popular decision, but at least you know that when you are making the decision that you have had that spirit of collaboration. But it can get pretty lonely at the top. And that's, you know, if you're a mom saying no to the kids that have been locked up during the pandemic, but you can't let them, you know, go do something that's not responsible. Or it can be, you know, the leader of the team where they've all been remotely working and now they want to do things a little bit differently, but you know that's not going to be in the best interest for the long term of the company. So, you know, decisions are still tough. You're still at the leadership role, but I think you can do a balancing act of making people feel collective and collaborative both ways. So rising above it. This was a saying my grandmother instilled in me in an early age. She was all about getting over those rough patches and just moving on. Sometimes you just got to look in the mirror and rise above it. But that takes a lot of work. It's one thing to say you're going to do that as a leader. You know, I'm just going to get over that situation. I'm going to move on. I'm going to build my team. I'm going to build morale. But that takes a lot of discipline and a lot of work. And so when I think about rising above things, that's not only just personal hurt, personal anguish, personal disappointments, but those can carry over into our work lives and our leadership roles, of course. But, you know, let's just take that high road and get real with the emotions. Feel it. You know, don't be awkward and embarrassed to feel it. A lot of times as leaders, I think we try to shelter our teams and shelter our colleagues from those reality checks, but that takes work. So that takes discipline, and I encourage you to take a hard look at yourself first, and I'm trying to do that. And that gets down to the integrity part. So that honesty and transparency and really walking the walk and talking the talk at the same time. If you're not demonstrating that, I mean, employees today are super savvy, clients today are super savvy. They can see right through that wall. So if you're not demonstrating those core values, those core virtues, those traits that you know are the right thing to do, that's going to generate this mistrust, and it's really going to slow down and erode your relationships across the board, whether that's customer relationships, client relationships, interpersonal relationships. It's going to affect it all. So dig deep, find that integrity that you were born with or need to strengthen. It's going to carry you a long way. So this story is really relevant right now. It's one of my favorites in the book as well. And it's about waking up on September 5th, which was Derby Day of 2020. And this really gets to the humanity virtue, which we're going to talk about next, as well as all the others. I mean, there's a lot of courage involved in that Derby. There's a lot of integrity, a lot of humility, because we had to reinvent what that was and what that looked like. But wasn't it magnificent that take away the pageantry, take away the juleps and the cigars and all the majestic parts of Derby, and what did we end up with? We ended up with this great sense of humanity and expression of genuine authenticity of the people. The trainers didn't talk about themselves that much. They talked about the teams that got the horses to the track, the care and the nurturing and the wellness about that journey of getting there in the times of the pandemic. The jockeys talked about how gracious and how grateful and the gratitude they had from just being able to do their jobs and being healthy. You heard these sentimental stories about the families that were behind not just the horses, but on the backside, on the training side. So this idea of all these imperfections had come together in this glorious expression of humanity. And that was in the time of really tough times around the social justice area, et cetera, which we're still working on. But I just thought it was poignant that the name of the winning horse across the finish line was authentic. And I can't think of a more perfect way of expressing that authenticity than the way these people did it on Derby Day. Happy Derby 2020. So as I said, this idea of embracing life and just living for the fullest and just enjoying that gratitude for each day and every fabulous moment and not bringing yourself down, whether that's as a mom or as a wife or as a leader, just trying to find those simple moments. I know I have tried to make it part of my regime to just take a few moments and express my gratitude and really express it. Like make that phone call. I really appreciated that note, or I appreciate you taking the helm and getting that correspondence out. I mean, just the little simple expressions of that can go a long way with embracing that concept. And it has to be done with genuineness and compassion. And otherwise, if you don't express that, you become unrelatable and at times just not accessible. So just be yourself and really express that sense of humanity, or try to do that in everything you do. And so kind of winding it down, I think for all of us, this time of the pandemic has been good, bad, wavy, slippery slope, sloppy track, all of the things we've talked about. For me, it equated to 3 words, the impact it had on me early on, and that was lack of sleep. I still have black circles under my eyes because I don't sleep that well. And I would wake up at 3 in the morning, not able to get back to sleep. I know many of you have experienced the same thing because I've talked about it. But I tried to flip that on my head after a couple of months and said, okay, how can I turn this into a positive? And I started looking back and journaling about what I'd seen. I've seen more sunsets than I've seen in 57 years of my life. I watched more history. I learned more about our community. I learned more about my teammates and what was going on in their lives. So in a sense, it was an awakening. It was a true awakening. And my goal with all that, and having come to some revelations during this period, I think that we can come further together. I think history's shown us that when we come up against tragedy, when we come up with unforeseen disasters, it brings us closer together. So from a leadership perspective, I hope we all take care of each other a little bit better. We're all a little bit more of a nurturing and caring community as a whole. So that's been my awakening, and I hope you will share that with me. So this is just a recap of some of the virtues that we've touched on today. How can we support each other moving forward? As I just mentioned, I think it's all about continuing learning, digging a little bit deep into your personality. What are your virtues? How can you build on those? And just being an inspiration to others. You don't sometimes realize that just by the simple gestures, you are really being an inspiration for others. So let's start this conversation, Zuri. I hope there's been some chat activity because this is my favorite part. No.
Zuri, I think you're on mute.
Do you want me to do anything? Am I on mic? Oh, okay. So Zuri's having some technical difficulties, so I'll get it started. Yeah, like, did we so miss the handshake? Or maybe the handshake's not your thing, but I just missed the interaction and that open, communication from the get-go. So I totally missed that. The presentation can be shared. It's my understanding that the link from today will be sent out to all the participants, and feel free to share that with others, share it with your teams. I think this is a really good team-oriented discussion to be had. speaking of collaboration, I think that's a great way to get into the content. In terms of courage, embraces bravery, tenacity, and confidence, right? Yeah, I think we underestimate the power of courage in our everyday life. You know, it takes a lot of courage. Look at these moms that are out there having to triple duty with childcare and rearing their kids and instilling the values and making them great people while teaching them and managing their personal relationships in the meantime, managing their leadership responsibilities. Wow, that takes a ton of courage. So knowing what you know now, what is your leadership style? Oh, wow. Leadership style. I have always been a collaborative leader, or so I've been told. So I just am a big believer in that. I think that good ideas can come from everywhere. Wisdom is everywhere. I found as I've gotten older, I'm learning more from my younger peers and colleagues than ever before. They've got a new, fresh perspective on process and leadership and collective thinking, critical thinking. So I would describe myself as persuasive. I've been told if you are familiar with Predictive Index, I'm a persuasive authoritative, I think. So it's just about, I like to bring people with me, and I like having people surrounded. I like to surround myself with people who are a lot better than me and know a whole lot more than me. So I guess my style is collaborative. Is there anything else, Siri? Yeah, there's over, I think there was up to 300 that were registered for today. And we all know we live in this opportunities have to come by the way. And sometimes you have to not get on the call. So that's the beauty of technology. And hopefully those folks who couldn't join us today can join through the link. But so happy everybody was here today. Do you see a tipping point that brings people back together where the cost is deemed worth to become present again? Wow. You know, I found that people are so zoomed out and so checked out of these virtual settings. I've gone back to the old-fashioned way of just a phone call and or just a conversation starter with someone that I'm trying to connect with again. And I think it's all about connecting and making those extra gestures. I mean, the mail still works. So if there's a tidbit of information, if there's a book or a white paper, rather than emailing it, I will just stick it in the mail and say, hey, when you have a minute, let's talk about this. Or there's a new brand activity happening that I think might be relevant for one of my clients. I just take the opportunity to meet with them one-on-one via the phone or on Zoom, but I don't make it a big collaboration. I think there's a lot to be said for one-to-one communication. And when do I think it'll be appropriate to be present? Again, I hope it's soon. I think we're having to take, steps and be safe about it. But I think you're going to see a huge investment with making those very strategic moves, whether it's in the workplace environment or from a services industry, how you're going to start interfacing with your clients again. It's going to be very intentional and very purposeful. So I see a huge, to the viewers' question, I see a huge investment being made on those types of business practices. Here's Paul. Hey, Paul.
Hello. Can everybody hear me? Is my microphone working?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing. And those that don't know me, I'm Paul Bolton. Just popped in here. Hey, going to Paul. Paul Bolton. I'm Director of Business Development here at Leadership Global. And before we sign off, I just have a couple things. So first, everyone in here, expect to hear from me. We just learned about a leadership pathway, and that's something that can be tough to navigate. So consider me your leadership and development Sherpa. So definitely want to be part of that pathway, and the Leadership Global Center want to be part of that. So I look forward to meeting with you all. Now, Zuri will be sending out an email following the presentation that will include a copy of the slides. So you will be receiving that. And it's also an opportunity to provide your feedback. As you can see here on the screen, we have some upcoming opportunities I want to make sure that everyone's aware of. First, coming up on May 6th, developing the leader within you. And so if you're new to a leadership position or have been in one for some time and need a reboot, or maybe you aspire to lead a team and you're just leading yourself right now, this is courses for you. It's an investment in a workshop, creating space for intentional learning and learning the process. I think we just found out about like being consistent in a process. So this kind of plays into that again, bringing that up again. The process involved in creating positive change, developing people who are very complex individuals, and articulating visions and goals. Right after that, coming into June, we have another green room, smart fights. You can smart fight. You can fight smartly. All right, managing conflict in the workplace. So our facilitator is Amy Gallo. She's the author of the Harvard Business Review Guide to Dealing with Conflict. And this course is going to provide like the latest. It's going to provide a pairing of research with practical advice. So you'll gain an understanding on how to create and sustain an open, honest environment, allowing for collaboration, negotiation, and something very difficult, that navigating the competing interests. As you can see on the slide, our next learning session will answering the call to Curious Leadership is on June 17th. Upcoming Best of Leadership Summit. So we have a rockstar line of speakers. You can check out this on bestsummit.org. If you want to see the full roster of the speakers, register for the event. I can put the link in the chat as well to assist you. This is an annual event. It's usually in March, here it's in May. It's giving access to leaders everywhere, being virtual, and it's a great day to unplug from like the daily grind and plug into a day of inspiration with benefits that will give you and those teams you lead a boost. Lastly, our Leadership Louisville class. Zuri talked a little bit about Leadership Louisville. The class applications for class of 2022 applications are open. This leadership program provides a powerful experience connecting leaders from all sectors of the community in a cohort that's engaged in design curriculum, promotes self-assessment, increased awareness and connection to the city. And more information for that can be found on our website, leadershiplouisville.org. Again, thank you to Henrietta Pepper and to all of you all for joining us today. And we look to be in touch very soon. So thank you all.